I'm Lisa Bonebrick. I'm an Alport patient, parent of a teen patient. In fact, everybody at ASF, our staff and board, are all patients and families, and I'm the executive director of Alport Syndrome Foundation. First, I'd like to note that by just attending this meeting to get informed as a patient is appreciated, valuable, and the beginning of our research roadmap. Please know that getting engaged and united as a group of patients is critical for rare disease communities to push research and potential new therapies forward. I think if we can move to slide 2. Having an engaged patient community is a tremendous tool in attracting the interest of researchers and pharmaceutical companies considering exploration and investment in our rare kidney disease. I'm grateful to see how our Alport community has demonstrated their commitment by about 480 people registering for this meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to start by looking at this Alport research roadmap. It all begins, as you can see, on the bottom left, circled by yellow and gold, is patients. It all begins with the patient community. The first step toward research is getting patients accurately diagnosed. We'll never know how large our community really is until patients gain an accurate diagnosis. Diagnosed patients also help us better understand more genetic variants. If you joined us for our first session today, we spoke about that, and which cause disease progression. Many of you, unfortunately, have experienced major obstacles in gaining accurate diagnosis. There's my own family stories as well. Now, with more availability of genetic testing, like we spoke about this morning, including renal diseases like Alport syndrome, the sheer number of confirmed diagnosed patients is growing daily. ASF is averaging, just so you know, about between 40 and 50 new members joining us for free membership every month. They're getting diagnosed. If you are a patient listening now and have a suspected diagnosis, we encourage you to do all you can to secure a true diagnosis. It's our right as patients to know our accurate and specific diagnosis. Knowing that we have Alport syndrome, and particularly our genetic testing results, can empower us in many, many ways, including understanding things like the current and evolving recommended treatment guidelines specifically for our disease, more about potential type of disease progression, who else in our family is at risk, potential other complications that should be monitored in Alport syndrome, like hearing loss and vision, and opportunities to participate in research that we'll talk about in a few moments, and opportunities to participate in clinical trials, which we will also talk about in this session. If you have questions or need information about accessible and affordable genetic testing, you can visit our website, alportsyndrome.org, or you can also click on the resources icon in our event app, click on genetics, and it'll take you to excellent information and links into genetic testing options. Next slide, please. So gaining accurate diagnosis leads to the next step on our research roadmap, the collection of patient data. The only way that medical researchers can explore our disease to understand exactly what's happening in our bodies on a genetic, cellular, and systemic level is to study data from a group of patients. And the larger that patient group and number of data points available, the more reliable and meaningful that research can be. That research and data makes it possible for pharmaceutical companies to explore our disease and choose to make an investment in developing potential therapies. There are several important tools for collecting patient data. The first and primary tool is a patient registry. This is where you and me can play a critical role for ourselves, for our families, and for each other. This is also where ASF has a new announcement to make, and that you are all about to be the very first to know. And in fact, that picture was of Alport, Cecil Alport, who collected patient data. Alport Syndrome Foundation is partnering with the National Kidney Foundation to create a new patient registry for Alport patients. Over the last several years, NKF has been investing in and building a platform to create a national patient registry for all kinds of kidney patients at all stages of kidney disease. The overall registry is called the NKF Patient Network. It launched just a few months ago, and our partnership has led to the development of the NKF Patient Network, Alport syndrome. It's a sub-registry as part of the overall network that will capture data specifically relevant to Alport syndrome, including currently understudied aspects of our disease and quality of life information. Participation in the registry is voluntary and free of charge, and the architecture of the registry platform also has the capacity to grow to become an international registry, which is the goal of both the National Kidney Foundation and Alport Syndrome Foundation. This is particularly important because Alport Syndrome Foundation has patient members from 71 countries. There are 25 patient countries represented in our meeting today, and several current clinical trials include sites and Alport patients in countries outside the United States. Next slide, please. So Dr. Kerry Willis, Chief Scientific Officer of the National Kidney Foundation, wanted to be here today to join us for this announcement, but she had a scheduling conflict. So instead, she provided this video message about how she and her NKF colleagues view our partnership. Dr. Willis holds a PhD in molecular genetics from New York University. In her 23-year career with the National Kidney Foundation, she helped establish the Kidney Disease Outcomes Quality Initiative. It's the first comprehensive clinical practice guidelines for kidney disease. And this classification system and approach to kidney care is now used throughout the world. It helped revolutionize the care of patients with kidney disease, including Alport syndrome. So Dr. Willis has spearheaded many major scientific activities, public policy, and legislative advocacy to improve the care of people with kidney disease. So I'm going to have Dr. Weinstop stop sharing his screen. My colleague Kevin is going to share his screen and share Dr. Willis's message to us, to you today.
I'm Kerry Willis, NKF's Chief Scientific Officer. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to have the opportunity to tell you about the NKF Patient Network and our new partnership with the Alport Syndrome Foundation. The NKF Patient Network is the first nationwide kidney disease patient registry open to people with all stages of kidney disease, including dialysis and transplant recipients. Some of you may not be familiar with the term registry. A registry is just a way of collecting uniform data on a particular group of patients and following them over time. What's unique about this registry is that we're able to collect data entered by patients on their medical history and quality of life and connect it with clinical data uploaded directly from their own electronic health records. We felt it was important for patients and the whole kidney community to have a registry like this for a few reasons. One is to have ready access to patients who may be interested in participating in clinical trials. Because the diagnosis rates are so low for kidney disease, in fact, only about 10% of people with kidney disease are aware they have it, it can be very hard to recruit enough patients to test promising therapies, and we wanted to help remove that barrier because we need new treatments. We also wanted to be able to hear directly from patients at all stages and with all causes of kidney disease what their challenges and experiences of kidney disease are, and be able to provide education and support. Joining the network is a very simple process, and we hope you'll all participate. Once the Patient Network Alport Syndrome portal is live, you can go to the website, register to create your account, and sign an online consent form. Although the main patient registry is open only to people age 18 and above, the Alport Syndrome sub-registry will allow parents to sign the consent form on behalf of minor children so that they can also join. As soon as the consent form is signed, the participant is assigned a unique identifier number, and their personal information is stored in a separate, secure, cloud-based location. So all of the data in the patient network system is de-identified and can be safely used for research without raising any privacy concerns. The Patient Network online platform is highly secure and meets all national and international standards for security of personal as well as health information. As a Patient Network member, you have access to a wide variety of educational resources, including Kidney Pathways, NKF's digital learning system that presents individualized education, nutrition and diet advice, and tips for staying healthy. You'll also find online communities where you can connect with other patients and summaries of the latest kidney research. You'll be able to opt in or out of being contacted via email when new clinical trial or other research opportunities are available. We believe this unique partnership with the combined strengths of NKF's programmatic skills and the Alport Syndrome Foundation's engaged patient community will provide a powerful research tool, support clinical trials, and help find new treatments. On behalf of the National Kidney Foundation, I want to thank the Alport Syndrome Foundation for this opportunity, and especially Lisa Bonebrake, Janine Reed, and Sharon Lagas for their support and collaboration. We've already learned so much from you. Thank you.
So thanks for tuning in for that. And now we'll have Dr. Weinstock continue to share the slides for the rest of our presentation. So we're excited about this NKF partnership. The NKF Patient Network Alport syndrome is projected to be pilot tested over this fall, over the next few months, with a projected public launch date of November 15th. You can click on the patient registry icon in your app to sign up to receive email updates about the progress of this project, and the initial link to participate as soon as it becomes available. Do we have the slides back up on the screen? Fantastic. I think we're on slide 8. You can click on the patient registry icon in your app, which now when you refresh your app after this presentation, if you refresh your app in the top right-hand corner or your web browser, you'll be able to see that new icon that says patient registry. ASF encourages you all to participate in this registry. And for those of you who are parents or caregivers, for you to register the children in your care who have Alport syndrome to attract pharmaceutical interest for pediatric clinical trials, collecting data on the disease progression, genetic type, and quality of life for pediatric patients is critical. So when you click here on this patient registry icon at the end of this presentation, if you are interested, that just signs you up to get your email and information to know that we'll make sure we get information to you about this ongoing status of it, and you'll be the first to know when it goes live. So ASF is excited about the opportunities presented by this sub-registry for a lot of reasons. Some of these opportunities include Alport syndrome to be studied alongside other kidney diseases in the same registry, particularly as renal therapy drug development seems to be trending in this direction, that clinical trials include several diseases studied together. To capture currently understudied aspects of Alport syndrome, there doesn't seem to be another way to get at that data. To build a registry that has the capacity and goal to become an international registry for patients, the benefit of a great deal of education and tools and resources for patients, the decreased cost of housing a registry that doesn't stand alone and has other sources of support and full-time staff and maintenance, and that patients within the NKF Patient Network Alport syndrome can manage their own personal data on their own terms, at their own convenience, and you'll be able to access and update your data at any time of your choice. Please note that ASTOR, the Alport Syndrome Treatment Outcomes Registry that's housed at the University of Minnesota, plans to remain open to current and new registrants as well. ASTOR has been invited to share data and partner with the NKF Patient Network Alport Syndrome. At this time, the University of Minnesota is choosing to continue its standalone registry. Whether or not you are relatively new or a long-standing registrant with ASTOR, we encourage you to participate in this NKF Patient Network Alport Syndrome Registry as well. ASTOR has been extremely valuable. However, the significant increased capacity and long-term value of the Alport sub-registry within the greater network of NKF will be of great benefit to the patient community overall. We are grateful to both ASTOR and to NKF. Once we get through the remainder of our presentation, we welcome questions about this new registry and that partnership. Now we're going to move on to the next slide, and I have some additional exciting news to share about the next step in the Alport Research Roadmap. I do want to note that co-founder of ASF, Sharon Lagas, planned to share this news with you, but she happens to be unfortunately under the weather today, but we wish her a speedy recovery. So she'll soon be spending time again with her brand new baby granddaughter, just born July 27th. But we're going to look at this research roadmap. Thinking about our roadmap, another critical patient data collection tool that feeds into clinical trials, you'll note at the bottom here, right after patient registry, is natural history studies that include human biosamples of patients over time. In the case of Alport syndrome, it's important to collect biodata such as blood, urine, kidney biopsy tissue, blood pressure, hearing measurements, family history, etc. Natural history refers to the studying of the progression of the disease process in an individual over time in the absence of treatment. One of the reasons that natural history studies are so important is that they help a rare disease such as Alport syndrome to be better understood. It studies the hallmarks of the disease and how they progress over time while unfolding patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed. So on the next slide here, you'll see that these studies natural history studies, the FDA published a set of guidelines that are helpful in the development of drugs for rare diseases like Alport syndrome, noting the value of natural history studies, that they can help researchers better understand disease progression, how it's managed, what the unmet needs of the patients are, can identify pathways for clinical trial drugs. We can look at the risk factors or biomarkers that can be followed to help better understand timing and potential of disease occurrence. And these studies help researchers determine the ideal time to treat a patient with a specific therapy. These are all really important things that we need to understand better in treating Alport syndrome and potentially curing it. So we have more exciting news today to share with you again. Alport Syndrome Foundation is partnering with NEPTUNE, the Nephrotic Alport Study Network at the University of Michigan, to launch a natural history study in Alport syndrome. The projected launch date is December 2021. The principal investigators, as you can see on this screen, for this natural history study are Dr. Michelle Rowe and Dr. Alessia Fornoni, both of whom are well known to our Alport community. They're noted longtime Alport clinicians and researchers who serve on Alport Syndrome Foundation's Medical Advisory Committee. This natural history study aims to recruit up to 60 Alport patients with diverse genetic mutations for a period of up to 3 years. Study site locations are available across the United States, and travel stipends and reimbursements are part of the study plan, and patients can remain on their current standard of treatment while participating in the study. NEPTUNE is a research consortium of physician scientists at 26 sites in the United States and Canada, along with the patient advocacy groups like NAFCURE International and the Halpin Foundation, and now with Alport Syndrome Foundation, that will be working on this additional ancillary study. NEPTUNE strives to bring the latest advances in research to a variety of diseases, and the overarching goal of providing them precision medicine for rare diseases. NEPTUNE's efforts have been extremely effective in driving new clinical trials in kidney disease. Many of the foremost experts in nephrology in the United States, as well as outstanding junior investigators, are involved in natural history studies at NEPTUNE. And one of the major funding partners of NEPTUNE is the National Institutes of Health. So our partnership with NEPTUNE to develop this natural history study in Alport syndrome is extremely valuable to research. Please watch our monthly e-news communications to stay in the loop on the launch of this valuable new research opportunity in which we as patients can play a major role in changing the future of our rare disease. Next, ASF's Volunteer Research Chair, Dr. Andre Weinstock, will briefly walk us through all the current status of clinical trials that are open to Alport patients. Again, this is where we as patients hold the power to help research succeed. And after Andre's presentation, we'll open up this whole thing for questions and answers. So thank you, Andre. I'll move this over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So for the purposes of the discussion, I'm going to briefly walk you through the current clinical trials that are open to patients with Alport syndrome. Please note that more in-depth information is available on our website, alportsyndrome.org, and in your event app by clicking on the 2021 research icon, where you can find a new video that I created to update everyone on our research roadmap and recent research investments made by the Alport Syndrome Foundation. You can also, while I hit the button, you can also find excellent resources on the clinical trials icon in your event app. And then you'll find recorded webinars with scientists currently working on Alport syndrome clinical trials, and a document that describes the different phases of clinical trials from preclinical trial studies through the FDA approval. So if we turn to the roadmap, I want to zoom down in on this, where this red square is. And if you blow that up, you'll see something that looks like this. This is our current Alport syndrome therapeutic pipeline. And I'm going to break these down into some of the individual steps that we're currently open, especially focusing on the ones that are currently open to you to participate in. So let's start with Sanofi Genzyme and Chinook Therapeutics. And they're both currently actively recruiting Alport syndrome patients to understand their compounds that delay the progression of kidney failure and have proven safe to be taken by Alport syndrome patients. Sanofi Genzyme is studying lademirsen in Alport syndrome, which is a HERA clinical trial. And the Chinook Therapeutics, which has the Affinity clinical trial, is studying atrasentan, a group of glomerular diseases, and including Alport syndrome. These compounds are both in phase 2 studies. In phase 1, they were tested in small groups of healthy adults to ensure there were no significant or life-threatening side effects. With phase 2, they are now looking to enroll Alport patients who still have their native kidney function, and other inclusion criteria such as a minimum age, body mass index, and minimum and maximum eGFR. To understand if these compounds show signs that slowing kidney failure progression and any other minor side effects, positive or negative, that might be observed with low dosing. Patients with Alport syndrome who meet the study criteria are eligible to screen for these clinical trials, and patients with suspected Alport diagnosis can also screen for these clinical trials. Both trials offer accurate diagnostic tools during the screening process. So importantly, the ASF encourages patients that meet the inclusion criteria for these clinical trials to get informed by watching the recorded webinars. Reach out to the ASF if you have any other questions, and especially important, do your own research and consult with your doctor if you are considering a screening for one or both of these studies. So in short, participating in these clinical trials is one of the most impactful ways that patients, that we can participate to help advance in research syndrome. And also sort of add as a side note, even though I'm a researcher and could do this, your participation individually doesn't require any scientific input. But if you're eligible, this is probably the one most impactful thing you can do for our whole community to progress new things. So you don't have to have a PhD, you don't need to be a scientist, but your enrollment of this is actually probably more impactful than any researcher working with mice or test tubes or anything to try to find that, because you're actually going to be in the trenches making a difference. Important to notice also is the Talaris Therapeutics Freedom 1 trial. This is not a trial which is specific to Alport syndrome, but as importantly, it's for patients anticipating the need for a kidney transplant and have a potential living donor identified. This is not a traditional compound, but a specific donor to recipient stem cell therapy to train the recipient's body to accept the donor kidney with little or no need for immunosuppressant drugs after 1 year of post-transplantation. So in a sense, both the donor and the recipient are participating in the clinical trial. Specifically because Alport syndrome patients are often young and healthy other than having kidney disease, it is anticipated that we'll make particularly good candidates for this clinical trial. And because transplant complicating factors such as heart disease, diabetes, old age are present in many other patients that need a transplant, Alport patients make a particularly clean slate to understand how the effects of Freedom 1 treatment method versus traditional transplants. Again, Alport Syndrome Foundation encourages patients that meet the inclusion criteria for these clinical trials get informed by watching the recorded webinars and reach out to the ASF if they have questions. Do your own research and consult with your doctor if you're considering screening for any clinical trial. A clinical trial that is not currently open to active patient recruitment, but is very much worth noting, is Reata Pharmaceuticals' Cardinal trial to gauge the effectiveness and safety of the compound bardoxolone methyl. This clinical trial completed patient recruitment in November of 2019, and in April of 2020, Reata Pharmaceuticals received permission from the FDA to file for what's called an NDA, a new drug application, specific to Alport syndrome. This is important because this is the first time any drug has been filed for an NDA specifically to Alport syndrome ever. So now that the FDA has this new drug application, we are expecting that in February 2022, they will have a review of all the data, and with its independent medical experts, they're going to make a decision of whether that they believe it's statistically effective and safe in treating native kidney function for Alport syndrome patients. Then we'll see during that the patients who had studied, of course, during the drug study period, whether it will be approved and doctors can start prescribing it to certain Alport patients who the FDA concludes may take the drug safely and experience benefit from it. It is important also to note that the AS clinical pipeline is dynamic. So please stay in touch with the ASF and the ASF community apps and social networks to hear about updates on current clinical trials and also potential new trials that might be coming up. Finally, it's important to understand that Alport syndrome is a complex genetic disease. From a scientific perspective, it's unlikely that one drug therapy will be effective for every type of Alport patient and at every stage of the disease. For this reason, continued interest and investment by pharmaceutical companies in the exploration of therapies for Alport syndrome is absolutely critical. As a patient organization, we do know the specific things that we can do to make Alport syndrome and our community an excellent partner for working with pharmaceutical companies to expand these interests. These include, first, demonstrating an engaged and organized patient community. You are helping us do this by having joined this, even this seminar, as members of the Alport Syndrome Foundation and attending today's meeting. Secondly, organizing and supporting a robust patient registry, as Lisa had mentioned with the new NKF Alport sub-registry that we discussed earlier, that identifying patients with that Your participation in this is going to increase our knowledge and understanding of how genetics of Alport syndrome correlate to the effects that each of us see for all the different types of mutations, hearing loss, eye abnormalities, and length of kidney function. Third, organizing, supporting a robust natural history study so that a diverse set of patients can be studied over time to understand patterns of a disease. We spoke to you early in the presentation about our new partnership with NEPTUNE and hope you consider participation in this natural history study. Finally, if you're eligible, discuss with your physician and family if participation in a clinical trial is right for you. In conclusion, the more engagement we have with the community as clinical studies, the more chance we have a community to gain new diverse therapies for Alport syndrome. With this ends our presentation section, and we'll now move on to your questions and answers. Thank you.
And it looks like we do have some questions. So let's get moving on those. It asks, what are your plans on having patients or patient family members who might be able to help with ASF, like engineers or software developers, help with marketing? We would love that. These are definitely important ways to volunteer and help our community as well. I encourage you, if you want to volunteer, to contact info@alportsyndrome.org. We'll get connected to you, what your interests and skills are, and there are definitely ways to help us. So we appreciate that question very much. There's a question from the Davis family. Will there be any studies or research for Alport syndrome with diffuse leiomyomatosis? And the answer is we do plan to capture this information in the new registry until we actually get more data. Once we get more data through registry and perhaps through the natural history study participation, that allows us to encourage research and attract research by getting patient data that researchers can look at and study. So do you want to mention anything else about that, Andre?
No, I think this is, again, your representation by joining the registry, by participating in NEPTUNE if you can, that will capture it. One of the things that we're hoping to do with this is a lot of the, let's say, call it non-traditional Alport syndrome, things like, let's say, I'm going to throw one out here. We know we've had a lot of discussions about aortic aneurysms or retinopathies. These are things that only as we start having larger numbers of patients participate in registries can we start to see, we see these patterns potentially with, and I'm just going to make an example here. We don't know this yet, but it might be a particular type of mutation, or it might be more prevalent in women with autosomal dominant or men with Xlinked in a certain type of skipping mutation. The more data, the more idea of patients we have, we can start seeing these patterns. At this point, it's really kind of like we're reading tea leaves. And each tea leaf is a patient putting in, here's my bit of data. And eventually, if we get enough tea leaves in there, we'll actually start to see, here's the real pattern. And we can start to understand, like, and we'll say diffuse myelinosis, that we'll see other patients that will have it, and we'll start to see, they share this particular type of mutation. And so we can make the correlation understanding it. So we're very much in the infancy of right now. It's like, okay, you have Alport syndrome, but what does your mutation mean? That's where the registry and NEPTUNE, and also in some sense participation in the clinical trials, because they're taking deep dives of recording of the data who participate in there as well. So this is exactly full circle to answer that question. These are the studies that are looking not just for diffuse myelinosis, but all the other symptoms that we see. For example, I'll go back to aortic aneurysms. We don't know enough about Alport syndrome to say, is that just coincidental, or is it very much part of a certain type of mutation of Alport syndrome that we should be looking for?
Exactly. Thank you, Andre. And it does get back to the registry. And your answer, one of the answers to that question also is very specifically, we have included diffuse leiomyomatosis in a capture field in the NKF Patient Network Alport syndrome. It is a question. So these are things that we will finally be able to capture more in depth, these understudied aspects, whether it's pregnancy complications, potential aortic complications, eye abnormalities, hearing loss. These are all sorts of data capture that we'll be able to do with this new registry. The next question is, why do clinical trials limit to a particular GFR? If a patient has end-stage renal failure but not on dialysis, why do they avoid putting them in a clinical trial? Andre, is this something that you feel comfortable talking about?
This is an excellent question. It's one of the challenges that again, traditionally for Alport syndrome, not always, but mostly, when you were talking about your native kidney function, this is not for post-transplant or people on dialysis, the way that your kidney function, and again, this is an average, is that your EGFR progresses slowly, and then very quickly drops off. That's the traditional pattern without ACE or ARB. With ACE and ARB, it's not quite clear how much longer you get in extension. But our understanding, and again, it's crude, is that there's this long, slow, steady decline before you drop off this cliff that we'll call crashing into dialysis and needing for a transplant. What these clinical trials we're hoping to do, they're all focused on preserving, except for the Tolaris, which is kidney transplant related. Their primary focus is how can we keep that kidney function steady or maybe even improved before you drop off that cliff. So where they're looking for is they need to capture patients who are kind of on that slow progression, not so early that, you know, they give you the drug and you're not going to see any positive benefit from it. They're trying to prevent it from going lower. But if you're already at the point where you've gone beyond that slope, it may be too late for the drug to have any effect. So they're looking for a very particular portion where you're declining fast enough that they can see that the drug makes a difference over a period of 2 years. It's a fairly long time for a drug. And the general thought is if you've already started progressing too quickly, it's not going to be able to stop it soon enough to see it, and that you'll probably reach dialysis before the drug really can kick in and do any effect. So there's this sweet spot that the clinical trials are looking for right now, where your kidney function is not totally healthy, but not also completely gone. And that's a window that, you know, depending on which clinical trial, they're looking somewhere between 90 and 20, or it might be 60 and 30. So each pharma company is making a very concerted choice about how to do that and when they decide to expand that to do that. And usually the earlier it is on that left to right of going to clinical phases, they start very narrow because they don't have a lot of wiggle room. They have very few patients. But as they start to grow and they can show effectiveness, they'll start to expand those to include more and more patients closer to having kidney failure and closer to being healthy. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, and I think it also plays in a little bit into this. The question on the other end of things is for young children with lisinopril, you know, what is the current understanding or thinking about if they can avoid transplant by starting on lisinopril or, you know, an ACE or an ARB, current standard of off-label care for Alport patients? What is the current thinking there? I'm not sure that we have an answer to that, but I do know that if you watch the webinars where we have interviewed, ASF has interviewed the scientists who are involved in these clinical trials, they do speak about that. What the clinical trials are looking at is the drug therapy that they are exploring. Is it of more benefit? Are patients seeing more benefit than just being on an ACE or an ARB? So many of the patients in the trials are on ACE and ARB to see if there's benefit with current standard label off-label standard of care. But Andre, I'm not sure that we can really answer this question about the hope is, of course, slowing progression. How long we don't know, because pediatrics have just really started recommending at very, very young ages lisinopril.
So I would refer that Oliver Gross, who's on our medical advisory committee and or was on our medical advisory committee and one of the foremost researchers in Alport, has just completed a 20-year study where they've been following patients. And the way that they've really worked this is because ACEs and ARBs are cheap enough and known to be effective enough for most people that they basically had to find families where an older sibling and a younger sibling, and diagnosis was only found later, and the older sibling did not get the ACE or ARB, and they know that the younger sibling has the same genetic mutation. They got them started in ACE and ARB. And what we're seeing with this publication over 20 years is that the ACE and ARB, on average, and again, this is the hard thing, we can't say for any specific individual, on average gives about 10 to 20 additional years of kidney function. And I'll say that very carefully because, there are not too many patients that we can find, oh, here's the older sibling who didn't get the ACE and the younger sibling who do that. And we'd love to do a clinical trial to do that, but it'd be unethical to deny a patient to saying, oh, we're going to put one sibling on the ACE and we're not getting the other one to see what happens. We want to get everyone on an ACE and ARB at the highest tolerable dose. And that doesn't, a very large segment of the population who can't tolerate even the lowest dose of ACE and ARB. So our hope right now is that we believe it's effective. It's the standard of care. But it goes back to these natural history registries and participation in things like NEPTUNE and the NKF registry they have to see whose kidney failure is at what level, what's their EGFR, how does that correspond to their mutation, how does that correspond to what dosage of ACE or ARB, what brand of ACE or ARB there. And hopefully if we get enough participation, we'll start to see patterns that will say, oh, if you have this type of mutation, and ACE buys you this many more years of kidney function.
And I think this patient was asking, or Erica was asking, do you have a link to that study? And yes, we do. We can definitely send you that. And the answer is yes, it's Dr. Oliver Gross. It was the Early Protect study. And that information is also on our alportsyndrome.org website. I sort of lost connection there for a minute. I had to rejoin the meeting. So I'm not sure that I lost any questions. I don't see any other questions right now in the chat.
So I'll take the next question we have. I missed, but are there any research studies around hearing impairment for Alport syndrome patients? Lisa, you want to segue that to it's another big news item that we have. So maybe got it lost in the fray, but I'll let you take the, I'm not going to steal your thunder on that.
Not at all. I'm glad that you mentioned this. This is really important. We will be capturing hearing loss and really what we hope to capture is onset age of hearing loss and also hearing loss progression through the new NKF Patient Network Alport syndrome. That registry will be capturing all that sort of data so that we can study this, because hearing loss and Alport syndrome, as we know, is so understudied, but we need the data in order to do a better job. We have developed wonderful relationships there with researchers out of Harvard that are doing a lot of good work in this area. In fact, we invested in 2021 in new research at the Temporal Bone Registry, and with work with Dr. Felipe Santos. And you can see that information if you click on the 2021 research icon. That information announcement is there. The Temporal Bone Registry is really a fascinating registry. It's one of the things that we can do as Alport patients. If you're an Alport patient with hearing loss, you can register to participate in the Temporal Bone Registry post-mortem. This is after you've left this life. The only way for us to research the inner ear is it's not accessible during life. And so folks who are willing to make an anatomical gift of their body after they've left this earth physically, then the Temporal Bone Registry will capture that and they're able to study it. And we've been able to find 17 patients across the world whose temporal bones are now being studied by Dr. Felipe Santos at Harvard. And Alport Syndrome Foundation is funding that study. But it's something that we can do as patients. Another role that we can play in research is to sign in advance donor forms. Those are available in your agenda section for this Alport patient, your role in the research roadmap in this agenda, and also in our research section, there are donor forms that for the Temporal Bone Registry, you can sign and send those to them in advance. And that's an important way to help research as well. Would you like to add anything else to that, Andre?
I would say that there are two young men who both passed away. They both had Xlinked Alport syndrome, I believe, and that's in part of the announcement from them. But they had contacted the ASF as they knew they were preparing to die, and said, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And that spurred us to say, maybe there is something we can, and we found this remarkable connection. So those two men, they're unfortunately no longer with us, but they made a fantastic selfless donation that's going to help the rest of us patients to understand what goes on in the inner ear. As Lisa said, there's you can go down to your doctor and get a kidney biopsy, and they'll stick the needle and take a pit out of that. That's not a problem. But if you're going to try to take an inner ear biopsy, the only way they can do it is you're going to go deaf. And so no one's going to sign up for that. So the only way we can do that is after someone has died. So it's a very selfless gift, but it's something that we really don't understand. Why hearing loss and Alport syndrome, what genes, what effects, where is the protein missing? So this is kind of our next frontier of doing that. And we've been very lucky to find not just these two gentlemen, but also worldwide. We found that, there's maybe at least a collection of 17 of these. And now your funds to this are now doing full genetic sequencing, proteomics on this, as well as correlation to what kind of hearing progression loss is. And this is really the first time we're opening up this, has been a black box all along, to understand what's going on.
Our time is getting short, so I do want to try to get to these two more questions. One, I think, thank you, Anna, for asking this, that CRISPR is on this list. And Dr. Weinstock, I know, Andre, I know this is kind of long, but would you like to speak to just what Alport Syndrome Foundation is doing and to help invest in understanding the potential of CRISPR?
Yeah, I would say that there is a research video that I put together, and that does highlight the work that Jeff Miner is currently working on. We also have CRISPR research going on with the Texas A&M, and the University of Siena is doing some very preliminary research work right now. A lot to cover doing that, and we're also hoping an object that we're looking at doing is potentially eye therapies with CRISPR. That's work that we're just now starting to get off the ground. But I would highly recommend going to the link to the video. Maybe just listen to the audio part. It's not me just talking. I try to get the slides, and then there are some detail from some of the researchers that you, as members of the ASF community, have actually funded to look into CRISPR work. Lisa, I'm just going to go back to the question from Charles here.
Okay.
So how are post-transplant patients still useful for study apps, just natural history, registry, et cetera? Excellent question. As a post-transplant patient myself, I don't want to miss the bus. You are critical to both NEPTUNE and to the new NKF registry. Your data is just as useful. There may be some portions of it, like a kidney biopsy, unless they're biopsying your native kidney, if there's anything left there. But the other effects of hearing, eyes, all that is still useful. Just because you've been lucky enough to get a kidney transplant, there's information there too. Why do people receive and some people reject? It's also part of this registry. So everyone who has Alport syndrome diagnosis is very welcome to participate in those.
Excellent. I will say, because we're running out of time, but I do want to say one more thing about CRISPR is that it was exciting to hear Alport Syndrome Foundation organized a series of workshops in the summer of 2020, so almost exactly a year ago, and pulled together some of the world's leading expert researchers in Alport syndrome and asked this question: Is this science fiction, or do you think it is possible that potentially Alport syndrome could be cured genetically? And they all answered in consensus that it is worth it to study potential CRISPR and gene editing. It is possible. The tools are now, and the technology is there so much more than even just a few years ago. And that's why we're making this investment. So it is a hopeful thing. It is not science fiction. It is potentially possible, but we need a lot of work to get there, and we have still so much work to do. So we are investing in this proof of concept. I do want to address that Jenny mentioned this a national history study that was done some years ago, and the problem with that is, when it's through a company, we don't have access to that information. And for that natural history study that was done quite a few years ago now, we don't have accessible information from that now. And that was done so long ago. But we will be able to, with this study with NEPTUNE, it is not connected to any one company. That data will really be owned by the patients and by NEPTUNE, by the Research Institute. So that information will be made more available to us. Andre, is there anything else you just want to say about that study?
I'm trying to look at what question you were looking at for the. I think some of the questions that I'm looking at right now, and that's the reason I changed the slide back, is for clinical trials. Definitely follow up on the out there. I'm seeing there's a question, are these trials new? Yes and no, but there's definitely more information out there than what we can cram into this Q&A. Looking at, how safe is your data in participation with the NKF and with NEPTUNE? These are very valid questions. The best I can speak to it is that this is, we are taking, there's nothing which is 100% safe, but we are taking all precautions that we can possibly do to make sure that your data is safe and anonymized, importantly, so that eventually this data wants to be mined. We wanted to have it in mind, but it's not going to be like, okay, who is this patient with EGFR and things like that. There should be no way to trace that back to, who was that individual? What was their social security number or anything like that? It's just basically, it's the data that this is patient, and maybe there's a random number associated to it, but that is not traceable back to the individual who donated it.
Yes, that information is all completely de-identified, and the platform is, as Dr. Willis said in her video, all completely de-identified, and definitely meets and exceeds all standards for national and international patient registries and patient data. It looks like we have reached our time, but I do think that we'll continue this conversation. We'll definitely continue to answer questions. If you do have more questions about any of this, your role in the research roadmap, or any of the new things happening, you're welcome to definitely email us at info@alportsyndrome.org, and we're happy to get back to individual questions. And we're really glad you were here today to hear our new announcements about major exciting things happening really for us in this research roadmap at points that are really critical for us to gain more data that will drive clinical trials and potential treatments and cures. And thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr. Weinstock.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll see you tomorrow.